The noise was not the roar of battle, but the insufferable, humid drone of the ventilation blowers fighting a losing war against the Philippine heat. It was a wet, heavy sound, like a giant lung wheezing inside a steel ribcage. Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, the 34-year-old skipper of the destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts, stood on the starboard wing of the bridge, letting the vibration of the deck travel up through his shoes and into his spine. It was the morning of October 25, 1944. The Pacific Ocean was a flat, slate-gray expanse broken only by the occasional rain squall that walked across the water like a dark, misty ghost. Copeland's normal was a state of carefully managed insignificance. His ship, the Sammy B, was a tin can in the truest sense, 306 feet of steel, armed with 2 5-inch guns and a handful of torpedoes designed to hunt submarines and screen the slow, lumbering escort carriers of Task Unit 77.4. 3, call sign, Taffy 3. They were the backfield, the leftovers, the support staff. The real war, the clash of titans, was happening hundreds of miles to the north, where Admiral Halsey's heavy carriers and fast battleships were chasing the Japanese decoys. Here, off the coast of Samar, normal meant drinking lukewarm coffee that tasted of desalination salts, reading intelligence reports about air cover that might or might not show up, and worrying about the rust accumulating on the depth charge racks. He lifted his binoculars, scanning the horizon. The lenses were foggy with condensation. He wiped them with a handkerchief that was already soaked with sweat. The air smelled of diesel fuel, ozone, and the rotting vegetation scent that drifted off the distant jungle islands. It was a smell that coated the back of the throat, a constant reminder that they were far from the clean, crisp air of Tacoma or Norfolk. "Captain, the coffee's fresh." "Or as fresh as it gets," said signalman Red Hennessy, offering a chipped mug. Hennessy was 19, a kid with freckles that merged into a permanent sunburn. He represented the machinery of survival on the ship, young, eager, and completely unaware of how thin the steel hull really was. "Thanks, Red," Copeland said, taking the mug. "Quiet morning." "Yes, sir. Radar is clean. Just the squalls." That was the fragile piece. The belief that the ocean was empty. The machinery of the ship, the steam turbines, the fire control computers, the sonar pings us idling. Men were in the mess deck, eating powdered eggs and talking about the World Series they were missing. In the radio shack, the operators were listening to the static-filled chatter of the combat air patrol, hearing only boredom. They were the rear guard, safe behind the massive shield of the Third Fleet, which was supposedly guarding the San Bernardino straight to the north. Copeland took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, scalding. He looked at the formation of escort carriers behind them, the Gambier Bay, the St. Lo, the Kalinin Bay. They looked like floating apartment blocks, ugly and vulnerable. His job was to die for them if necessary, but today, he expected to do nothing more than watch them launch planes to support the ground troops on LITE. Then came the disturbance. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't an explosion. It was a voice on the TBS talk between ships radio circuit. Usually a channel for routine station-keeping chatter. The voice belonged to an erratic, squeaks, breathless pilot from the Combat Air Patrol, flying a Wildcat fighter, miles to the north. The transmission cut through the bridge's speaker with a crackle of static that made the officer of the deck jump, ... surface contact, ... break. Large surface contact. Break, ... IC, ... pagodas. Copeland froze. Pagodas, it was a precise, factual term that shouldn't exist in this sector. Pagoda masts were the distinctive, towering superstructures of Japanese battleships and heavy cruisers. But the intelligence reports from the night, before the Iron Gospel handed down from Halsey's staff, stated unequivocally that the Japanese center force, the main enemy fleet, had been turned back. They were retreating. They were hundreds of miles away, licking their wounds. "Bridge, this is CIC." The voice of the radar officer buzzed over the intercom. "Captain, we have a ghost contact. Bearing 330. Range. Range is closing. It looks like land clutter, sir, but it's moving." "Moving? How fast?" Copeland asked, setting his coffee down on the chart table. 20 knots, maybe. Islands didn't move at 25 knots. Copeland looked to the north-northwest. A rain squall was obscuring the horizon, a dark gray curtain drawn across the world. The pilot on the radio was shouting now, his discipline cracking. ... confirm ... Battleships? I see the Yamato. I see the Yamato. This is not a drill. The center force is here. They are transiting the San Bernardino Strait. The order roar, rather. The assurance from Third Fleet that the strait was guarded had been a lie. Or worse, a mistake. The disturbance wasn't just enemy presence. 'Twas the sudden, violent unraveling of their entire strategic reality. The gate had been left open. The Japanese main force wasn't retreating. They had turned around and were steaming aggressively south, straight toward the undefended escort carriers. "General quarters," Copeland said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, calm, detached, like a lawyer reading a will. "Sound general quarters. Set conditions zebra." The klaxon began its rhythmic, shrieking gong gong gong. The ship woke up. The lazy hum of the blowers was replaced by the thundering of boots on steel ladders. Men dropped their trays of powdered eggs. The machinery of survival kicked into overdrive, fueled by adrenaline and confusion. Copeland stayed on the wing. He needed to see it. He needed the visual truth to override the logical impossibility. The squall curtain to the north began, too thin. First, he saw the shapes. Dark, jagged silhouettes emerging from the mist like sea monsters rising for air. They were massive, not destroyers, not cruisers. These were mountains of steel. Then he saw the light. On the horizon, a series of bright, violent flashes erupted. They were distinct long, orange tongues of fire that pulsed against the gray sky. He watched the horizon burning red and thought it was dawn till he realized the sun was still hours away. "Muzzle flashes," Hennessy whispered, standing beside him, the color draining from his face. "Captain ... Those are muzzle flashes." Copeland checked his watch. 6:45. The sun was indeed rising, but that light to the north wasn't the sun. It was the main battery fire of the Japanese battleships, firing. From 20 miles away, then came the sound. It wasn't a bang, it was a rumble, like a freight train passing overhead, followed by the terrifying whoosh of heavy ordnance displacing the air. Seconds later, the ocean erupted. Giant geysers of water, dyed strange, unnatural colors, pink, purple, yellow, shot hundreds of feet into the air around the escort carriers. The Japanese used colored dye bags in their shells to spot the fall of shot for different ships. It was a surreal, terrifying rainbow of destruction. The disturbance was absolute. The Sammy B was facing the largest battleship ever built. The Yamato and a fleet of cruisers and destroyers that outweighed Taffy 3 by a factor of 10. There were no friendly battleships coming to help. There were no heavy carriers. The convoy that never arrived was the Third Fleet. They were alone. Copeland walked into the pilot house. The bridge crew looked at him. They were terrified. They were looking for the logic, for the order to retreat. To make smoke and run, Copeland grabbed the microphone for the 1MC, the shipwide intercom. He knew that panic was the real enemy. If the men thought this was a mistake, they would hesitate. He had to give them the truth, no matter how brutal. "This is the captain," Copeland said. The static hummed for a second. "We have intercepted a large Japanese fleet, battleships and cruisers. They are 15 miles to the north and closing. We are all that stands between them and the carriers." He paused. He looked out the window at the massive splashes of colored water bracketing the white plains. "We are going to engage." Copeland continued, his voice steady, anchoring the ship. "We are going to make smoke. And then we are going to launch a torpedo attack. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can." He clicked the mic off. The silence on the bridge lasted for a heartbeat. Then the machinery took over. "All ahead flank," Copeland ordered. "Make smoke. Helmsman, bring her around to 300. Head for the E." Splashes. The Samuel B. Roberts shuddered as the engineers opened the throttles wide. The ship, built for 24 knots, began to vibrate violently as it pushed toward 28. Black, oily smoke poured from the stack, mixing with the chemical white smoke from the fantail generators, creating a thick, artificial fog bank. Copeland wasn't running away. He was running at them as the destroyer Escort surged out of the squall and into the clear light of the battle. The scale of the nightmare became clear. The Japanese fleet filled the horizon. It was a wall of steel. The pagoda masts of the battleships towered like skyscrapers. The Sammy B looked like a toy boat in a bathtub. Range to target. Copeland barked. 14,000 yards in closing. The gunnery officer shouted. "Too far for the 5-inchers. Close the range," Copeland said. "Get us under their guns." The decision was a rejection of reality. The logical move was to flee. The survival instinct screamed to turn south. But Copeland operated on a different frequency now. He realized that the Japanese admiral, seeing the ferocity of the tiny American ships charging him, might mistake them for cruisers. He might hesitate. The fog of war